Once upon a time, a child called Idi Amin was born. At the age of 20, he joined the British King's African Rifles as assistant cook. He was known for his ambition, courage, and cruelty. In January 1971, Amin staged a military coup and became the president of Uganda. In August 1972, he expelled 80,000 Asians, people who had played a major role in the economy. We were given just 90 days to pack up our lives and leave. My parents, like many others, never wanted to leave. Uganda was our home. His 8-year rule was brutal, earning him the title the Butcher of Uganda. Expulsion at 50 is a podcast created to raise awareness and increase knowledge of this historical event. 50 episodes later, many themes and learnings have emerged. So who were the stateless persons? By the end of October 1972, the dispersal of the Asians was in its final stages. Those with British passports went to the United Kingdom. Others went to India, Kenya, and Canada. Some 5,000 fell under the auspices of the United Nations High Commission for Refugees, UNHCR, who created temporary refugee transit camps in Austria, Belgium, Italy, Malta, and Spain. These people were considered stateless, as their Ugandan passports had been nullified and citizenship revoked. In several episodes of the podcast, we heard about the experiences of stateless persons. In many instances, people traveled not knowing where they were going. After weeks and months in transit camps, people were accepted by Sweden, the Netherlands, USA, Belgium, Norway, New Zealand, Canada, among others. It was the first time these countries opened their doors to people who were neither white nor Christian. In episode 25, I spoke to Urmila Patel, whose father ended up in Belgium, while she traveled with her mother and siblings to India. For 2 years, they didn't know what happened to their father.
My father was a professional. He was a teacher, and he was allowed to stay in Uganda. The professionals were allowed to stay, so that was one of the reasons he stayed there.
I wonder what that was like for you, that he decided to stay and then the family got split.
It was very painful, I would say. As a teenager, you are like excited to sit on the train for the first time, and also we don't realize much. But I remember when we sat on the train, I held my father's hand until the train started moving. It was the hardest part. I could feel in my heart as of now when I'm telling the story to leave my father, that this was it. We didn't know where my father will be, dead or alive, in this military coup.
And how do you think it was like that for your mom?
My mom kept silent. She silenced herself. I think she was going through a trauma in herself, realizing with 5 kids, how will she manage? There was not much money, and she didn't know anything. She had a few things in India, and she didn't know if they were there or not. So it was very hard for her.
Similarly, in episode 48, the Lobo family were also separated. Rodney stayed behind to finish his studies, while Mariette went to India with her sisters and parents. In Uganda, discipline and the rule of law were replaced by chaos and anarchy. Many guests described their relief when their planes left Ugandan airspace. On the 1st of December 1972, Rodney boarded a plane bound for Italy before ending up in Norway. So, do you remember, Mariette, the time when the conversation was happening where, Rodney was going to stay behind?
No, I actually don't. I mean, I remember just bits and pieces of things that were going on, and I've been thinking about it lately that I'm actually quite amazed how my parents managed to keep me safe because I knew that something terrible was going on. I just couldn't grip it. I just couldn't understand the extent of it. I remember them like whispering and talking when we went to bed and things were going on. So I don't really remember how or when I got to know that he was not coming with us. But I know that my parents were really sad about it. They were very, very worried. And he had just his last exam left. I think that was why he clinged on to being there, but also because it was his home country. I think he, like some other people, thought this could pass over even till the very end. He realized that people were disappearing and people were leaving and things were really dangerous. So then he left.
You ended up in India, in Gujarat, I remember. And then, did you have any communication? Did you hear from your dad?
We didn't hear from our father until after more than a year. So we didn't know where he was, but a telegram came and it was written he's in Belgium. And my auntie, I remember, she says, I remember Belgium, Congo. And that was a fun made out of it that my father ended in Belgium, in Congo. It was just next door to Uganda. We were like, okay, Papa is there. I hope it is safe because Congo was going through some turmoil also. Then a letter came, a big, huge letter came with 2 pages, and my mother went through, and she says, I'm in Europe, and we didn't know where Europe was, Belgium was. It was next to Paris. Oh, okay, Paris, but we didn't know where Paris was. So we were very, very happy. The girls like shouted and screamed that, oh, we'll be going to Europe, to Belgium.
My last memory from Uganda from those days was from the airport, from the runway, saying goodbye to him in this total commotion with people all over. And my mother broke down. She cried and cried. And in India, again, they were terribly worried about him because at times they didn't know where he was. And I'm sure at times they didn't know if he was alive. When they got this telegram saying that he had managed to escape out of the country, then different kind of worries occurred. They didn't know where he would end and what would become of him and what would become of us also. It was actually on the 1st of April. The postman came and we had been waiting anxiously for a long, long time. My parents really desperately wanted to get out of India and get to Norway because they were living off our savings and we were living with relatives. They didn't get a job.
Establishing new lives. We left a country where the sun shone every day. Exchanging it for grey skies, short days, cold and drizzle was a shock. Women wore their saris and slippers as they didn't possess warm clothes. For many, the early experiences in these foreign lands was of poverty, both in money and lifestyle. The external environment was often hostile. Many spoke of experiencing racism, discrimination, and violence. Getting Indian spices and vegetables was also challenging, especially in the early days. For many, survival was the main aim, securing a roof over our heads and money to put food on the table. For many women, this meant finding paid employment, at home or outside. Younger parents adapted more easily, and many blossomed, developing new careers and making new friendships. The ability and opportunity to work was important. We quickly started paying taxes and became functional members of society. Guests also spoke about the warmth and hospitality of the local people. All right, so then your father's in Belgium. You then end up in Belgium, and yeah, how was that?
I had a good and bad experience. Bad experience, few I would say, is just that few of my colleagues in the college, they didn't know much about, I believe, geography and culture and the values. And they thought I came from the jungle. I'm like a Tarzan. They used to watch Tarzan movie was played that time on the TV, and they said, "Oh, this is what you came from that." And they beat me up. But other than that, overall, I was really, let's say, I was really welcomed. He couldn't teach. It was more in Dutch, and my father had to do a job in a labor work, building houses, putting bricks. And it was also at night during the winter time that he would go whole night and come frozen kind of in the mornings.
And for your mom?
But I think the culture difference was huge for her. She couldn't talk to anybody like she used to do in Uganda. And it was more in an apartment we used to live. Like Uganda is more open. You have your neighbors, the doors are open. You can talk to anybody. And even the vendors came by. But here it was all closed door. And winters were hard. And it was expensive to put on the heating even.
You end up in Norway, and I wonder, like, when you look back, how would you describe that process?
We were very warmly welcomed. The way we were received from the time we put our foot on Norwegian soil, the way they met us at the airport and they took care of us those very few days, those very first days, but also the first months and the first years was quite extraordinary compared to today, the way refugees are received today. We were, of course, people were very welcoming, even though many of them had never seen a person with brown skin before. When I look at Norwegian policy documents from those years, I can see how they also address the issue of Norwegians not being used to refugees from countries outside of Europe, and how they have to change their views, and they have to be accepting, even if they find this maybe a bit scary for some, that this is reality, you have to get used to it. Yeah, the rhetoric was totally different.
So when you look back, what do you think, really helped you as a family?
One of the things that helped us was the support of the community, Caritas Católica, who came between to help. They took over afterwards. And we were supported. We were given all kinds of things we needed in the house and clothing, schools where we can go to schools. We were signed up I was signed up in a college, and my siblings in the schools. And my father got to work there, and we got housing. So we got a great deal of support. And even after that, if there was any issues, we could reach out to them, and they helped us.
Bittersweet. While the trauma we experienced was real, we didn't have the language to articulate it. Many of our parents shut down emotionally and just got on with it.
My experience and my parents' experience and my siblings' experience were different. And for me, through this trauma and the expulsion, life for me ended in Norway, and it ended well. I feel a strong belonging to Norway. When they don't welcome refugees now, they do something to my feeling of belonging too. But for my parents, though they had this longing for the life they lost, they didn't want to go back to Uganda because that life wasn't there anymore. But they had this sorrow and pain. For them, it was a relief to come to Norway because they knew that was the future for their 3 children.
So would you say that your experience was bittersweet?
the whole experience of the expulsion, people were friendly, everything was nice and clean. But that experience, Uganda, would never leave our hearts. That was a part of us that will stay rest of our life. So I would say bitter sweet experience in Belgium. We try to balance the East and the West and our stories from Uganda, and the community was really glad to hear our stories and help there. But other than that, Uganda experience, the expulsion happened was hard for everybody. But in general, we learned to know new culture, I would say.
Keeping the flame alive. In 2022, we commemorated 50 years since the expulsion. The anniversary was an opportunity for us to pause and reflect on our collective past, inviting us to take a fresh look and ask new questions. For some, it has been an inquiry into their own history and heritage. Some have taken the time to visit Uganda, thereby completing the circle. The different events of the 50th anniversary was an opportunity to build solidarity and reconnect with the past that may have remained hidden and unspoken. It has also enabled us to acknowledge and celebrate our unique life paths. Documenting the oral history using podcasts has contributed to the discourse and ensured our stories, our experiences, and our voices are never forgotten. We are proud to be a cohort of global citizens that have demonstrated resilience, entrepreneurship, and tenacity wherever in the world we may have ended up.
I wrote that book, Out of Uganda in 90 Days. It released on 2014. And from that book, I connected with a lot of Ugandan Asians around the globe. Last year, I went to Uganda on my 50th anniversary after 50 years. And I had a very touching experience again. It was very different in a part, but I still see the Ugandans still have an open and a big heart for everybody without any expectation.
Okay, so let's just talk a little bit about your forthcoming trip.
With my brother and my sister, and recalling things together, actually, and having my children listen to that, so that they can carry this story with them. Because when the three of us have gone, there's no one left. I think it's more than being important on a personal level. I think it's politically extremely important to keep alive the stories about how we were welcomed to Norway. For me, it's very important to tell that story in the situation we are in today, that it's possible for countries, even though the number of refugees in the world are much, much higher than they were in the 70s. It's possible if Europe had shown solidarity together to receive refugees with dignity and humanity and respect.
We must not be afraid of our neighbors. If every refugee is given a chance and supported the same way as the Ugandan refugees got 50 years back, there would be less discrimination among people, and we would be able to create a better world. Together, we can make a difference.